7 o'clock. Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our Harvest Book Club. My name is Beatrice, and tonight, let me tell you, you're going to want to get ready to grab your pen, to grab your notebook, and to get ready to be changed and challenged as we welcome Spring Harvest Pop-Up, our amazing guest tonight. And many of you will already know her. In fact, I don't think many people don't, to be honest. She is an internationally sought after speaker, leadership coach and mentor, incredible influencer. And basically, she is all the things. Okay, she's an author, she's a pastor. And Jo lives in the fullness of her purpose. I think I can say that, Jo. And you call women to do the same. And at the risk of sounding like the ultimate fangirl that I am, you know, from our chat earlier this week, may I just say what an actual privilege and honor it is to have you with us tonight to Harvest Pop-Up. So welcome, Jo, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. And it's nice to be talking to the UK.
Yay. We were just talking before we joined you about the timeline differences. What time is it there again?
Okay, so this week, and it's just this week, you are 5 hours ahead of me because we change our clocks on Saturday, Sunday.
Wow.
So then normally it's 6 hours, but this week is a bit of a mess. So yeah.
That's so interesting because obviously we've changed our clocks a week earlier than yourselves. So you're having to recalibrate in your brain a bit how kind of what time it is in the world. That's really tricky.
It's strange. It's strange, but it's
absolutely strange. But it's such a pleasure to have you. Now, last night, what we did is we got together with some of our ladies from our book club, and we got together specifically to discuss your book, Ready to Rise, which is what we're talking about tonight, which calls us to own our voice, to build our community, and to step into our influence. And you know, I have to say, we had so much fun together last night talking about that. And we also learned a lot about what it truly means to rise in our various contexts, because obviously all of us coming from different places. Can you share with us briefly just your journey of how you came to write this book?
Yeah, I mean, the book stemmed out of a lot of conversations with women who lead. I do a lot of leadership coaching. I speak and I host a podcast and things like that. So that often means I'm interacting with people. So when I would be at the end of an event, or when I'm in a leadership space where I was one of very few women there, or very few women of color there, I'd often end up in conversations with women about their leadership journey and them asking how did you get to do what you did, or what were the doors that opened for you? Did you have they were just like genuine conversations. And I think in certain coaching situations as well, we would have these kind of like what we say here stays here kind of conversations, which articulated what the journey of leadership for a Christian woman was actually like, and what the challenges they actually faced, and what their lived experience was, whether it was the loneliness, or whether it was imposter syndrome, or whether it was a complicated relationship with ambition, or whatever it was. And so in some ways the book was a desire to kind of put some of my thoughts down, some of the how down. Do you know what I mean? Some of this is how, or these are some of the things that help us, both for the women, but also for the men who are committed to seeing women lead. And so the book centers women's stories deliberately, because we don't often in a leadership space get to talk about the woman's story and the distinctives that are part of her leadership journey. And so I wanted it to be one where women would hopefully see a glimpse of themselves in some way, or a glimpse of their story, or just permission to have a story which is different from the narrative that they're surrounded by. So even if it wasn't like my story, just the fact that it was yet another one was a reminder that there's more than one. Do you know what I mean? And then, but also I wanted to put something down so that when male leaders are talking with the women leaders they're seeking to invest in, that they've got a neutral space to begin the discussions.
Oh, I love that. That's really good. And I think the idea actually that men themselves need to hear this, and so often you can see this book and think, oh, it's just for women. But actually, we need all of us together, don't we, in order to release each other into the spaces that God is calling us into. So absolutely, you're right in that. And I think that's one of the things that you emphasize as well in the book, this idea of visibility and ensuring that there is good visibility of leaders. That quote that you use, that you cannot become what you cannot see. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey yourself of becoming a voice, and how that's been in terms of looking around and seeing other people? And
I mean, it was, I think lonely and complicated would probably be the broad brushstrokes, not the whole time, but I think I would often say, and I genuinely mean this, I didn't actually really think I was a leader, and I was very uncomfortable with that term for many, many, many years. I was very uncomfortable with the idea of being a writer. I'm very uncomfortable with it. Do you know what I mean? All of those things, because I'm not trying to say I'm all that. I'm just trying to respond to what I feel called to. But I think there was an added layer of complication when you don't see people around you doing it. Is it okay if it's you? I ended up going to Bible college, which was a bit weird because I wasn't quite entirely with the Lord, but that's another story. I came back while I was there, and there was a woman who was on staff, a Black woman on staff who was a Londoner, and it was outside of London. And I remember just the difference she made. And see, it was a picture. It was a kind of like, okay, so women who look like me, who have to find their hair products in random places like me, they too lead. It was the 90s. Slim pickings. Slim pickings, and a woman who was as dark as I was. Do you know what I mean? All of those things were really resonant for me. And I think one of my friends, a friend of mine here is a transracial adoptee, in terms of she has been adopted by white parents, an Asian woman. Sure. And she talks about the language of the transracial adoptee community, saying they encourage families, if they're not the same ethnicity as their child, to make sure they surround themselves in community with people who share the ethnicity of the kids, so that the kid sees themselves as normal. Yes. And doesn't see themselves as other, that they see someone who looks like them, breathes like them, eats like, do you know what I mean? All of that kind of stuff. And when she told me that, I thought that has been the challenge for me as a woman leader. Because when you don't see what you can be, you wonder if who do you think you are anyway?
Wow, that is so true.
You are to want to speak in front of thousands of people. Because why thousands? Why can't you be content with 3? Oh, do you know what I mean? Or who do you? Because all the leaders I saw around me were white men, wonderful dudes. But I didn't speak like them. I didn't have the same story as them. My pathways to training and leadership were different from them. My family system was different from them. My family values didn't work in the same way as they were. And so so sometimes it was, can I show up, and can I show up as myself, or is there something fundamentally not leadery or not or scarier, not godly, the way I would do things?
And I think that's it. That's what you've just said. Obviously, I can identify on so many levels, and I do, because actually for many of us, especially for many Brits who are women of color who feel called to lead, you are it. You are it for us. So we kind of look at that, and I think actually how incredibly courageous for you to step into that space, because now I have somebody that I can look for when I'm thinking, actually, is there anyone who looks like me, who leads? So thank you for stepping into that and owning that courage, and actually paving the road for many of us, and many of whom are going to follow actually after that, so that we're no longer the only. So I really just thank you so much for that. And I think what you're saying is so important for the next generation, isn't it? It's that idea of we're shaping minds and mindsets and still. And I think one of the things that we sometimes maybe try not to say too much in the UK is that it's hard not to look to the USA and think, you've all got all these speakers. How, where have we gone wrong? Because it's even you've been in the USA, is that 16 years from what I've read? And we're still sort of asking the same questions that you're mentioning, I guess, who are the prominent voices? So where have we gone wrong here? What happened?
It's weird. The fascinating thing about the question is, when I think of how I spend most of my time in the US, it's other women leaders saying, what is going on? There is nobody here. Do you know what I mean? And so in some ways it's a relative question, in terms of the US are still wrestling with those challenges. It's hard to say where I guess I don't know whether I'd say about where we've gone wrong, but I think the question I would ask, I think if you're looking to another context, then you might miss out on what's on your doorstep. Do you know what I mean? I think that's one thing I would say. But I think the questions I would ask are you proactively looking to invest in women leaders of every age, stage, and ethnicity? Can you name them?
Wow.
Can you name them? Can you say who they are in your denomination, in your stream, in your nonprofit, in your charity, wherever it is? What does it look like? Because if we believe that women are made in the image of God, and that's what the Bible teaches, then it's not that they're not there.
Yes.
Of course they're there. Women are made in the image of God. So by theological default, there will be women who are gifted. There will be women who are called. Throughout history, there's always been. The issue is access, environment, opportunity.
Yes.
And so I think the question we have to ask ourselves, and hear me when I say this, Beatrice, I think this is a question that every leader has to keep on asking. It's a question I need to ask myself for the rest of my life. Who am I investing in?
Yes.
And I think the ongoing question, and not so that there's one woman leader, do you know? It's like one rant. I mean, that's not enough. Considering that women often make up the majority of a church and all, do you know what I mean, are the biggest givers, or do you know what I mean, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even make strategic sense to look at it that way. But I think the question we have to ask is how are we investing in them, and is our investment strategy working?
Yes.
I mean, how are we doing it? And is it working? Is it producing women who are free and able to lead in the fullness of their God-given capacity, in the line of their call? And the thing I've discovered over the years is that the path for men and women isn't the same. It isn't. It's not often a clear linear path for women. And as such, our leadership development has to reflect that. And the way we give opportunity has to reflect the nuance of what women's lives look like.
Wow, that is so true. That is so good. And we're obviously live on YouTube, so there are loads of people watching, tuning in, listening to your every word, as I am. And we've already got questions that have come in. Oh. And one of the questions that's just come in, Jo, is a question actually that links in really nicely to what you're talking about in terms of the contribution that women bring. So this question is from Lisa, and it says, what do you think is the unique contribution that women's leadership can bring to the world right now?
Gosh, I mean, there's a part of me which is loath to say women are like this and men are more like this, because I've seen in different cultures it doesn't always match. Do you know what I mean? In different socioeconomic groups, it doesn't always match. However, I think one of the things that studies have been done, I was looking into this recently with a company called, a research body, McKinsey & Company, who do a lot of consulting with global businesses. And they listed a number of skills that are particularly valuable in this moment, and ones that women are seen to prioritize more, seen to be stronger in. It's not that men don't do them. It's not that at all. It's just that they seem to be ones in the lane of women leaders more. One is leadership development and personal development. Another was the whole idea of collaboration. The other, in terms of reward, there was something in relation to, I can't remember what it was now, something in relation to how we reward people. And so I think, but I think part of the reason why women's voices are really key right now is because women have always made up half of the universe, do you know what I mean, half the sky. And so whenever they're not there, it's an incomplete story. It's, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talks about the danger of a single story.
Yes.
The danger of it. And so when we don't have women's voices, or when we have an echo or a distant interpretation of a woman's voice or woman's skills, we're always going to miss it. And so when we wanted to contextualize our leadership, when we're wanting to reach our community, I think one of the most powerful things women can simply bring is their story. Right now, this is what life looks like for me. This is how I experienced education. This is how I experienced poverty. This is how I experienced suffering. This is how I experienced infertility. This is how I experienced singleness, because it will nuance and inform how we lead. This is how I experience wealth, how I experience the media, how I experience the church.
Yes.
How I experience belonging.
Really
I think there are skills, like I said at the beginning, that it's been shown that women are particularly strong, that we need collaborative voices, we need all of those things. But I think that even if you don't feel you have those skills, your unique contribution and your unique voice brings a perspective that has often not been heard, or it's been interpreted and it's not been heard as clearly as it needs to be.
Wow, there's a lot to process in that. And I think that is so good. What we've got as well is somebody who's also sent in another question, which I think links in again with that. The question says, in order to deal with unhelpful or just thoughtless comments throughout my life ministry, this is somebody's story, throughout my life or ministry, I have had experiences of being disempowered, and I often use humor, and this works pretty well. But are there other helpful strategies you've used?
Yeah, to deal with people's, remind me the beginning of the question.
This says that that she's felt that because in order to deal with thoughtless comments of leadership, which is obviously something that happens as a woman steps out into into leadership.
Yeah.
It says she's often had to use humor, and this works pretty well. But what other strategies have you used?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing with humor is that it can make light of something, or it can bring, or do you know what I mean? It can be, particularly Brits have a way of humor which kind of leaves the point in the ground. Do you know what I mean? Which is good. I would encourage you to make sure it's not at the cost of yourself. And I'd encourage you to make sure that you are not still feeling minimized as a result. Do you know what I mean? Some things I just do directly now. So, do you know what I mean? I think as I've grown with confidence, sometimes I ask questions. I like to confront with questions, not because I don't like confrontation, but probably because I like confrontation a little much. Is that I find it just easier. I confront with questions, so I ask things. I ask, how many women have you got in your context? How many women are leading in your context? And I just let it hang. I just let it hang there.
Yeah.
Or if it's someone I know where something has been, then I will talk to them about it. I mean, the Bible talks about Matthew 18. If someone's done something, you point it out. That's what a sister does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what family does. And so I will say to people, actually, and normally not in the moment where they want to be, but I will make it clear and say, I don't think you meant to do this. I'm going to assume the best of you, sometimes even when they have to, sometimes anyway. I don't think you meant to do this, but here's how this landed.
Sure.
And so I try and keep the language neutral, but the point made.
Yes.
And because I don't need to accuse you, but I do need you to understand what's been done.
Yes, and in that way, actually, what you're saying is that you're building that, and firstly, you're practicing using your voice, and also you are challenging some of these mindsets that often keep women hidden in the first place. The fact that you've stepped out, there's obviously something going on. It's obviously not very positive. And I think in order to grow, both for the person involved, but also for the leader who's at the center of that, there needs to be that honesty, which is, takes courage. So I hear completely what you're saying. One of the things that I loved reading in the book was just the challenge and the practical steps that you offer. Obviously, you wrote this before 2020, and I felt very much like you captured a moment, where it's so prophetic. You talked about seismic shifts, right? And I bet you didn't imagine the seismic shifts would be what we're talking about right now in this year. So I guess my question here is really, what does it look like now to rise against the seismic shifts of this incredibly epic year?
Yeah.
Especially in the USA, you've had to deal with quite a lot more than we've had to, in terms of the racial injustice, etc. What does it look like to rise now?
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging. It is challenging. I live in Minneapolis, so
wow,
or at least in the suburbs of Minneapolis. So George Floyd's murder was about half an hour away. Also it would drive kind of thing. And was not the first. Philando Castile was and well, I mean, if we were going to give names, we'd be here a very, very long time. So it has been challenging, but I think what I've realized as I've reflected on this year and I've looked at leaders through the Bible, that they don't often rise in times of comfort. They don't actually often, like we talk about Esther and stuff, and we talk about Esther being called for such a time as this. And it's like, it's become this kind of cute print now, and it's kind of on mugs, this kind of merchandise. It's in the face of genocide.
Wow.
That challenge is given to her. It's in this, she's already like, I can't do anything. And Mordecai's like, you're going to die anyway, sis. So, do you know what I mean? It's in the face of 20 years of oppression that Deborah rises.
Yeah.
It's in the face of slavery and oppression that Moses sees the burning bush. It's in the face of working in government under, I don't even know the best way to describe Xerxes, really. But Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have to make their way. It's in the, so we're in good company. I mean, terrible, but good company in the sense of throughout biblical history, we see God's people rising in the face of difficult circumstances, challenging circumstances, overwhelming circumstances where the odds didn't look good.
Wow.
So I think that helped me a lot to give me some perspective. I mean, all the prophetic voices wouldn't have to say anything if things were okay. They'd be like, rock on, carry on as you are, rather than this is a mess and it's all going down kind of thing. So I think that's one thing that's helped me. But I've had to reckon with, and again, looking at the likes of the Ezekiels and the Jeremiahs and the Esthers and the Deborahs and the Phoebes and Priscillas and whoever, that there is an internal issue as well, because because part of our challenge is it's not like we're like, this is how it's going to get better, folks. We're all still in this. We're still dealing with a racial reckoning. We're still dealing with shutdowns, lockdowns, open, shut, close. I mean, the ever-changing face of this stuff. And so I think looking at what it looks like to rise for my understanding right now, is there are two things. One, there is the call of God on your life.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? In terms of, God, how do you want us to respond to the challenges of our day?
Yes.
What does it look like for me to represent you in the world when the world looks like this? You know, the twofold, we've always had this twofold purpose: know God, represent him in the world.
Yes.
What does it look like to represent you when the world looks like this? Is it, and it could look differently for all of us, but there is also rising saying, but God, this is really hard. And there is grief, and there is loss, and there is anger. And so I found the Psalms and Lamentations really helpful, just to see you know, in the history books and some of the prophetic books, you see the outworking. In Lamentations and the Psalms, you see the you see the internal kind of like, you see the internal wranglings of the human being and the human condition. And so I would hate for us to write ourselves off because we don't feel we've got the right feelings to rise.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
For us to be like, oh, I can't rise right now because I feel awful. No, it is awful. That's why you feel awful, because it sucks, right? Do you know what I mean? Right now.
No sugarcoating it.
You know what I mean? And I think, but I think that I'm reminded of the Lord's words to Paul about God's power being made perfect in our weakness, God's power coming into its own in that place where we feel fragile, inept, inadequate, uncertain. Those things don't negate your rising. They just help you remember who you're relying on as you rise.
Yes. And I think what you just said about being in great company, it's that scripture, isn't it? In Hebrews, since we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses,
So good,
we are absolutely in good company. Even with Jesus, you know, it's never been easy. And yet we still need to listen to that voice that says, actually, what does it look like in this moment to rise? And I guess it's that call again to go back to God and to sit with him and to let him speak over us and let us know exactly what that looks like in the moment, rather than completely write it all off. Because if we did that, nothing would ever get done, because it's never, I love what you say kind of from the very beginning of your book about not waiting for an opportune moment, because it's never going to come. There's no perfect time where everything's going to be neatly in place, where you're going to feel like you lead, where you're going to feel like you're called. That feeling may never come. So what do we do? That's incredible. And then there's another question that's come in. People are loving this. And this one is actually resonates massively with what I found as I read. It's about the story of Deborah. That story of Deborah, and the way that you put it in this book, I have never seen it applied that way. It's incredible. And I could see a whole movie. I literally closed my eyes and I was like, I can see a movie of this. But the story of Deborah that you share in the book, it says, love your story of Deborah and how she owns her story and stands her ground with her story. As you write, this is difficult for us. Can you say more about how we can do that and how we can get comfortable in that ownership? This is a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we have to do is stop hiding and calling it humility. Do you know what I mean? I think there is a cultural thing that we have spiritualized. There is a spiritualizing of, as though it's seen as more holy to be more demure, to not say things, to be silent. And sometimes silence ain't that at all. Do you know what I mean? It's not. But or to assume that to speak about anything, or to simply agree with what God says about who you are, to agree with what God says about what you're called to do, and to say actual factuals, do you know what I mean, is not pride. It's not pride. Now, I'm not saying we can't be proud about those. I mean, of course we can, because, you know, we're human beings and we fall and we mess up. But I think that's one of the things that is a mindset shift, because what challenges me and inspires me so much about Deborah is that she just says what happened. Do you know what I mean? She's just saying what happened. And I think practically for us, when we're thinking about using our voice, you know, like when we may be in a meeting, it could be at work, it could be wherever, and people ask for our opinion, and we, in our heads, we have the idea and we don't say it because we don't want to be seen as arrogant.
Yes.
The next step is to say it. Or when someone asks you something, you're in a conversation with somebody, because this is about this. Yeah, this is maybe about a stage, but it's also in like how we parent, how we befriend, how we function in the supermarket. All of these things, when we act like we don't know something when we actually know.
Yeah.
I want to encourage us. Owning our voice is kind of is like not lying, not dumbing yourself down and calling it kindness.
Yeah.
Not hiding your gifts and burying them and assuming, like, God, if you really want me to do something, you will send some, I don't know, Pastor Charming to discover. I mean, like, this ain't Disney.
Yeah.
But it's understandable, because we've often been socialized to expect that not saying something is the right thing, which it is, except when it isn't. Do you know what I mean? And so I want to encourage us, if you have an idea in a meeting and someone asks, say it, and you might have to practice it in front of the mirror. Do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to be weird, but if we've been used to silencing ourselves and saying, I don't know, we have to flex the muscle. And I think sometimes we have the kind of heart shift and we still don't know what to do because we haven't practiced. And so, and honestly, I've had to do it in really clunky ways sometimes. And it's something I still have to grow in, like, and in terms of saying what I want, saying what I hope for, saying what I dream of, and practicing it in safe places. Almost like when people used to do mock interviews for things, you almost have to do it if you're not used to doing this stuff. And what I loved about Deborah is is that she takes the credit. Do you know what I mean? It's like, the villages were abandoned until I did something, like high five me. You know?
Like, I came in and I sorted it.
You know what I mean? You ran off. You were scared. Yes. I got up.
Love it.
Good. Do you know what I mean? We're good. And Jet L did something too. I don't know what all you people. It's just hilarious. It's just hilarious. But on a practical level, I would ask you to first think internally, where have you hidden your gifts and called it humility? And where, like, those of you have voices. And sometimes we've done it because people have told us you're too much, or you're not good enough, or people have minimized us and said it's not very feminine to be loud, which
right. And
is a lie from the pit of hell.
Yeah, it is. It's a lie.
And the devil's a liar.
About that. You talk about that because you mentioned the thing about the Ezra.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody follows Jo, you know that she does this tea time at 3 o'clock or whenever it is in Minnesota.
I think it's 8 or 9 for you guys.
So you'll do these tea times, and you talked about this last night, and you might want to go and find her on Instagram and really listen to that talk, because it's absolutely incredible. But you mentioned this in the book about the importance of owning, understanding that when God creates Eve and he makes her a helper for Adam, it's not a second-rate kind of creation. Right. So maybe we've bought into this false idea of what it feels like to be feminine, and what it feels like or what it is to be, strong, or that's what you just said about strong not being feminine. And yet you really challenge that in the book. So we can share with us about the idea of the Ezra, because I found that incredibly healing.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's a huge one. It's a huge one because I think we are left with doubts, wondering if we're okay. Now, the word, first of all, we know there are two creation narratives, and the first one says that we're made in God's image. Well, that has implications in itself, in his image and likeness. It's not a mirror image, but it's the imprint of God. Yes. The imprint of God on us. That means your gifts and your wiring is not a concession. Your gifts our gifts didn't start with us. We didn't plan them. We have no idea what we're doing, but God knew what he was doing, and he wasn't upset about it. He's not intimidated. He's not scared. He's not frightened. He's not, oh my gosh, I gave her a brain. He's not like kind of like, oh, whoopsie or anything. He's not confused. He's not confused. And then when he talks to humanity there, he tells them, represent me in the world, go off and do it. Second narrative, and this is the one that more kind of gets us complicated. In Genesis 2:18, it said, God's made everything, it's all good. And he says, it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him. And I think what we often do is put our understanding of because when we think of helper, they're assisting, they are not backup plan, but they're not quite an also ran, but they're the warm-up act.
Yes.
And on one level, that's fine if that's what you want to do. There are contexts in my life where I'm certain when I'm coming alongside, game on, because I want to do it for the glory of God. I'm in. But the word itself, Ezer, is a combination of words meaning to rescue and to save and to be strong.
Wow.
That's what the word in the Hebrew means.
Wow.
And so the nature of helping begins to get transformed when we understand what it meant in their context, not when we've extrapolated it into ours.
Cool.
And so then when you look at where that word appears, twice it's in reference to the woman, 3 times it's in reference to giving military aid. And I think 16 times it's God delivering his people from their enemies. So when it's like, I lift up my eyes to the hills in Psalm 121, where does my help come from? Ageism. God is not a backup. And again, we're made in his image.
Yes. Yeah.
Made in his image. It's also a verb as well as a noun. I think it was Michelle Guinness who writes this in her book, Woman, the Full Story. Yeah. She talks about it being verb as well as a noun, meaning to protect, surround, defend, and cherish. Yeah. And the word suitable is often, and actually more commonly translated equal to.
Wow.
So I think, and obviously, whenever you translate certain things a lot, I mean, Hebrew and Greek are such dense word of things. But before we even work out what that means in terms of our practice, it says a lot about our God-given identity.
Yes.
It says so much about how God has wired us. We have kind of adopted, and for a number of reasons. One, because of socialization, but also because of our experiences. We have maybe adopted these ideas that strong is bad, strong means aggressive. No, aggressive means aggressive. Strong just means strong. Yeah. You know what I mean? That we are almost encouraged to have a passive waiting to be rescued kind of vibe about our faith. And then, so the women who don't feel like that just feel like weirdos. And feel like there's something not just fundamentally wrong in what you think, but something fundamentally wrong with who you are. And that's an agonizing place to be. Yes. To feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you, no matter how you try to love Jesus, is a horrible place to be.
Wow.
But what I found when you look at these words and you're just looking at how God names us, it reminds us that sometimes the way we've named ourselves or the way we've been named isn't accurate.
Yeah.
It's just not accurate, because this is before anything went wrong with the world.
Wow. And I think it's that thing of what you're saying, really, what I'm hearing is that the idea of starting actually and challenging the names that you've called yourself, if they're not in line with what God has said, to then reject that. And I
think it's important, because what does it say about your gifts then if you're an Ezer?
Yes. Wow.
What does it say about your calling if you are, if in God, in his design of you? And I know, don't get me wrong, I know our callings have seasons. There have been times when I've done things which are very public, other times I know it. I mean, do you know what I mean? I get that. I'm not saying, I'm not, and I don't think our calling is our dreams are our rights. I'm not saying that. But what does it say if we looked at ourselves in the way that God looked at us, if we agreed with him that we were able to protect, surround, defend, and cherish, rescue, save, and to be strong, and he sends us out in the world to represent him, what would we do differently? Knowing that it wasn't a concession, but it was actually God's desire.
Wow. So much to reflect on that. The questions are coming in.
Oh, cool. More questions.
Which is really
I wish I could see you all. I'm gutted.
Which is great.
Gutted.
So this one is actually a follow-on to what you're sharing. It's all about, obviously, strength. One of the things I love about listening to your voice is that, yes, there's this incredible strength, but you're not afraid to be vulnerable, right? So how do you help others? This question says, how do you help others to see that women can be strong and vulnerable at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, I think I think to go back to one of the earlier questions about the voices and the lack of our stories, I think we have to live that story. I think we have to live that story. So I think for me, I do in practice, and I think it'll look different for different of us. So I'm going to give an example as a descriptive thing, not as a prescriptive thing.
Right.
And so take the principle, but contextualize it for your own lives. So for me, I don't apologize about being strong anymore. I spent way too long doing that. Of course I'm strong. I've had periods for years. Okay. Do you know what I mean? We've had, forget our leadership stuff. Just looking in the mirror has required it. Do you know what I mean? Forget all of this. Do you know what I mean? For those of us who have gone through childbirth, for those of us who've got up again after a miscarriage, for those of us who are living as single women, feeling like we don't belong, yes, you've been strong. For those of us who've been widowed, for those of us who've been divorced, for those of us who've got up again after rape, sexual harassment, bullying, minimizing, yes, you're strong. Why? Because you're still here. For those of us who are handling depression, who are taking antidepressants, these are the fact that you are still here is a sign of your strength. You may not even have the words, because strength is not a personality type. Strength is not being an extrovert. Strength is not being an introvert. It's just strength. Yeah. You know, it's the resilience you have that keeps you coming. And so I think the ways that I seek to model it is, one, I like to be honest about my own story. I like to have people who are close enough in my life. I don't have secrets. There's nothing in my life that nobody has known about. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Not now. I'm not into everybody knowing my business. Clearly, that's not that, because this is not overshare central. Do you know, you know what I mean? It's like within the context of appropriate relationships. Yeah. But if I need to cry, I'm going to cry. If I need to laugh, I'm going to laugh. Yeah. It was for freedom that Christ set us free.
I love that. Yes.
So why am I apologizing for breathing? Why am I apologizing that my body went south after having kids? Why? What do you mean? Why am I apologizing for my blackness? Why am I apologizing for the loudness of my voice? I did not create this voice.
Wow.
I did not create this skin tone. I did not create this body. God did. He saw it as good. I'm agreeing.
End of.
You know what I mean? I'm agreeing. So but I would say the way we function with that is I don't feel anymore that I have felt it at certain times that I've got to show up in a certain way, and it has cost me dearly. Yeah. It has cost me. I have burnt out on trying to assimilate into other people's expectations of me. Wow. I've burnt out in trying to be nicer or milder or quieter or gentler in their versions. Now it doesn't mean you walk around like someone without social skills, because I mean, because that's weird. We don't have to be weird, but I think the way I walk with the two is I'm honest about the broken pieces of my life that still need healing, and I do the work that needs to be done around them. I keep people close who can ask me horrible questions that I don't want to hear but need to hear.
Yes.
I take God seriously, but I try not to take myself too seriously. Yeah. And when I'm leading in a context, I make sure I'm in places who actually don't just tolerate me, but will celebrate how God's wired me.
I love that.
You know, and those are the people. But I'm not for everyone. I get it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not expecting everybody to agree. Within the body of the beautiful body of Christ, there is a range of theological views, and I'm going to respect that. Yeah. I'm not going to fight with someone to argue about something they don't believe. But in the spaces I'm in, I need to show up as I've been wired.
Yes, because you're right. It is crippling, isn't it? Yes, you're right. Because what you're saying about kind of showing up and somebody else is crippling, and you can't sustain that. So I guess doing that long term can be absolutely, it's hard. Yeah.
Because also what happens is you end up making your calling convincing them that you get to be there.
Wow.
That's not my calling. My calling is to speak and to lead and to look after my kids, to be a good neighbor, empty my trash, do all of that. Do you know what I mean? That's my calling.
Yes.
My calling isn't to convince you that I should be in the room.
That's so true.
If you don't think I should be in the room, I'll go to another room.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And if someone needs convincing, they can do it from a distance without me burning out, getting bitter, having to forgive you, having difficult conversations, feeling really stressed, and eating too much carbs. I don't have time.
No one needs to eat those carbs.
For fun, not for survival. You know what I mean? Care about my calories.
Wow. The questions again, there's this question that I think links in nicely, and this is probably going to be one of the last questions we take before we wrap up, because I do want it to be that you give us some final practical steps that we can take, from the book and also from your incredible wisdom. But this one says, do you think there's still a connection between appearance, that is looks and age, and whether women are given a more significant leadership platform?
I want to say no, but yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say no, but yes. And
how do you deal with that?
I want to say no. I want to say no. It's all about your calling. But the data shows that women are, and now I'm not saying within the church, but in leadership spaces, the data shows that women are taken more seriously when they wear makeup.
Yep.
When they use their hands.
Let's not even talk about the hair issue.
Oh gosh. And I think there is nuance within the cultures.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? In terms of what ageism looks like, do you know what I mean? I think there's nuance, but I want to say no.
Maybe one day we will. Maybe one day what we're leading towards is that when somebody asks this question, we'll be able to say absolutely not.
Yeah.
One day.
But I think there is ageism.
Yeah.
I think when we try and adopt the values of the world on things, or when we're drawn in that way,
that's how it goes.
And that's not to say, I'm not saying that therefore the people who were there shouldn't necessarily be there. I'm just saying who's missing.
Yes.
I'm not saying switch it out necessarily. I'm just saying who else should be here.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't feel we need to audition our bodies to speak. I don't think we should be do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't think we need to be auditioning our age or, Now, saying that, am I going to dye my hair? Probably, because I don't feel it matches my face. But, you know what I mean? I don't feel it matches my face. But I would like to say no, but...
Sadly. Oh, I want to say finally, but I don't want to, because I really want you to keep talking to us. But I know that we are up against time, so we've got a couple of minutes. How do we move? I know, there's not enough time. And really, honestly, one of the things I really hope that will happen is that you will come to Spring Harvest, you spend some time with us, and you will talk to us when we're allowed to have conferences, and when, so I'm really
when I'm allowed back in the country.
And you're allowed to come. But one of the things I want to do, it's really easy to then take all this stuff and it becomes kind of head knowledge and not heart knowledge, right? How do we move past the theory of this? What are some of the practical steps that we can, I guess, for the woman who's listening right now and who's kind of going, I really want to go forward and I don't want to sit back anymore and I really want to do something about this. What forums can you point to that woman or to these women who are speaking? And how can you help them to think, actually, this is what you can do next to invest in your voice?
I mean, there are lots of things, and I'm sure there are things I'm not going to know because I've not been in the UK for a long time in terms of living. But I think there are some. I think the questions I would ask you is, who do you need to tell about the dreams and the visions that you believe the Lord has given you? Who do you need to tell? Who's a safe? And can I just recommend? I'm going to sound weird, but I'm going to say it because we're here now. When you tell someone, try and choose not that person who isn't jealous of you, because it messes you up. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to put that there. Just going to put that there. And
yes.
I would ask, who do you need to tell that this is, do you need to tell your leaders at church? Hey, might seem a little weird, but I just felt God stirring me in this. What would you recommend as a pathway for me growing in this area? Because then you put it out there.
Yes.
That would be one space. For those of you who are starting, now it depends on where you are in the journey as well. For those of you who are starting out, I would say, who do you need to tell? Is it, and training may not be realistic in the same, do you know what I mean? But just because that pathway doesn't work, are there things you can learn? Like, what do you need to study, or where do you need to grow? And if you don't have money for it, because I like to learn for free if I can. Anyway, but what podcasts are there? If it's like, oh, I feel I'm called to teach the Bible, but I don't know enough. There are loads of podcasts. There are loads of like theological colleges that have podcasts which are teaching and stuff. Get yourself your learning for free. Do you know what I mean? Do your thing. So there's that that I would encourage you to do. The hard thing about this is that you might see a pathway that's clear that doesn't work for you, and you're digging one. So it might take longer. I sometimes feel like, how come that dude just kind of jogged lightly and I'm sweating, got sweat stains, I'm tired, I've got cuts and grazes because because the pathway wasn't clear. I hate to say that's a little normal. It's not right, but it's familiar. If you have started developing this stuff already, like I'm going to use the speaking as an example. If you're, but this again, take the principle, contextualize it for your own life.
Yeah.
Say you've know that this is part of your call and you've done something, you just want to do more. But first of all, what do you want to do? And where do you want to dream? Are you connected with other leaders, in your community, in your city, particularly in this digital? I'll come back to the digital thing in a minute. Do people know, or are your gifts, your call, your leadership, whatever your sphere, is it the world's best kept secret?
Wow.
Because it can't afford to be the world's best kept secret. Wow. There are many dreams and visions that are just strewn along in our that are happening in our personal iCloud. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So somebody needs to know. And then it's thinking through who can help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Who can you, and it's hard. The thing is, I love giving advice like this, but I hate it because it is hard. And it's hard to find mentors. More often than mentors, we need sponsors, by the way. Yes. We need people who will open doors for us. Who are the people who are encouraging you in your gifting? Like, I would say to every event, like ask them. If you don't see enough women leaders there, just say, hey, who are you bringing? Because sometimes people think that they're doing fine. And they need to be reminded that one woman on the stage isn't enough. One Black woman appearing, or one Asian. Do you know what I mean? That there's lots of us out there, kind of thing.
Yes.
But I also would encourage us. There is something that we can do in our peer learning as well. So who do you know who's doing the same sort of thing that you are? And maybe you don't know them, but you've heard of them. Yes. Reach out to them, slide into their DMs, and do something productive with it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then I would say, in this sometimes these terrible, terrible, terrible circumstances create unexpected opportunities. If you feel like there are things that you are called to say, and I think this is something that did happen in the US maybe a decade ago, is as women not discovered the internet, but they built communities on the internet space through blogging and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And now it's podcasts and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. Use those things because the world is there. If you feel you've got a message to share to people, that is an audience as well. Wow. And I promise you, people are watching.
Yes.
What else are they doing right now? They ain't walking outside very often. Is there something the Lord's inviting you to build? And I know that's not that when we imagined ourselves on stages or prayerfully had dreams and visions, that wasn't what we saw. It wasn't what we saw. Yes. But half of those things hadn't been invented yet when we were first reading.
This is true.
Yeah. So I think those are I think that there is an element of some things you've just got to try. Call it an experiment, if you will. Experiment in 2021 with putting yourself out there more.
Wow.
Experiment in 2021 with networking with people on LinkedIn and Instagram. Experiment with investing in your gifting.
Wow.
Invest in it. Like if we were all given a car and said, God bless you, like that's a great gift, but someone's got to teach you how to drive the car. Otherwise you're going to kill somebody. So, or yourself or both. So what does it look like to develop your gift?
Wow. Yes.
Because it's worth investing in. It's worth unwrapping.
Yes.
I think those would be important things. Have ongoing conversations within your community about what you practically need to make it work. Me and my husband talked at length about what did it look like for me to live into this calling, and what did he have to learn how to do around the house so I had time to do the things I needed to do. I mean, that's a conversation we have on a loop now, and our kids are teenagers now.
Wow.
And we still have that conversation of what does it mean?
Yes.
For us, if this is the call, how do we change what we're doing to make it possible?
Wow. That's really, really good, Jo. That's really great. And we are sadly out of time, but I want you to just take a couple of minutes to invite some of the women who are called to speak to your leadership platform, because I know that you've got something that they can access right now. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, totally. So I have a coaching platform a digital coaching platform, and it grew out of the desire to help leaders rise, and it's for women. And not because, obviously, for the first 25 years of leading, 20 years leading, I was mainly working with men. But like I said, I was tired of being the only one, so we got to do something about it. But also, sometimes you just need a safe space where you can. So it's a digital coaching platform. There's something we do every week. There are people from 4 continents on it. There are Brits there. And you can learn in your own time. There's coaching sessions. I have guests on. This month it's Amy or Ewan, because she's a friend, and Rachel Hughes are the guests this month. But there are people from the States, there are people from Canada, just all over the place. And I wanted to create a space where women could network together and get to know each other and rise together, because I think that is how we do it.
Love it.
I think that's how people do it. So I want to encourage you, and you can go to my website and stuff, and it starts with a 30-day free trial.
Wow, good.
So come and explore and see if it's something that's a fit for you. Can I say one last thing aside from that?
Go for it.
I think when times are tough and challenging, I'm reminded that this is exactly the time when we need to dream.
Yes.
This is when we look at the history of recessions and things like that, and wars, you see times of great creativity come off the other side of it.
Yeah.
And so it may not feel like this is a good time. Wow. And you may not feel you have energy, because we don't. But I want to invite you and encourage you to, even if it's 2 minutes in a day, to have some time to yourself, to imagine. Wow. To prime that, and whether that dream takes 6 months or 13 years is not the issue. Yes. But you've got to prime the pump, because we need your ideas, we need your gifts, your way with numbers, your preaching voices. I should not always be doing this. And I mean that. I'm not saying that to be weird, but honestly, because you are called and you are gifted and you are anointed. There are business leaders amongst you, creatives, singers amongst you. You need to make these conferences busy. Do you know what I mean? You need to make these businesses busy. There are entrepreneurs amongst you who are saying, look, we can't go back to a world that no longer exists. You will pave the ways of the future, but it starts with you giving yourself a little bit of margin to dream again, or to heal again. If you've been broken by leadership before, go see your therapist. Go get a counselor. I'd rather do the counseling for a year than need it for 20. Do what you need to do, but we need you. It's not just like it's nice for you to do this. You are needed in this moment.
Wow, you are preaching to me, Jo. You're preaching to me right now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate every single nugget of wisdom that you've given us tonight. And I know that this is going to be played over and over again for people who perhaps didn't even get to see it tonight. So thank you so much for giving your time to us. Thank you for talking so honestly about this. I think we really needed to hear that, and I definitely did. So thank you. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate everything you said. So yes, that's it. That's it from us. And I will absolutely watch this back. Thank you so much, Jo, and God bless you in